Bitcoin Liberty Live, episode 55. We're
We're on the
live.
double nickel.
Double nickel.
Nice.
I remember years ago, I when I was going to college in Montana, there was no speed limit at that time. It was simply night 55. At night, if it was dark enough for you to have your headlights on, the speed limit supposedly was 55. Other than that, there was no speed limit. It was
Right.
reasonable and prudent. So,
I
night
want
55
to share this. Post this.
on Twitter.
Yeah.
We need to ossify Bitcoin.
Old guys fixing problems.
B plus plus. It was
Furman.
rumbling. I was catching parts of B plus plus down in Austin. Lots of interesting talk. It's also fascinating to see online, all the fiery debate and some of the ad hominem stuff. And then you see a
Oh,
bunch of
right.
the same folks on stage together. And I don't know, it was diplomatic enough, I suppose. But it was, yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. I'm becoming very disenchanted with the entirety of that debate. Um, but anyway, yeah. I mean, I saw some of those talks, but I'm starting to see people do like these tactics. Like someone posted a selectively edited clip of Lop talking about like block sizes and stuff like that, and they framed it as a way like, see, Lop's a big blocker or something. I'm like that. But the funny or the problem for me was I actually watched that video, and he had a very thoughtful sort of consideration about, are we really talking about the right thing when we're talking about block sizes? And this chain tried this dynamic block size and that kind of blew up in their face. And this chain tried this. And here's an idea that we might consider trying. And so it was this really thoughtful thing about like the economics of block production. And somehow someone selectively clipped part of it to make it, which wasn't at all what the theme or the topic of that discussion was. So it was
Is
very,
that the one from years ago?
no, it's relatively recent, I think, but I'd have
Oh,
to go dig it up to find it.
there was a part where he was with, oh, what's her name? I'll have to find it. I've
No, no,
watched her.
this was a presentation he was doing by himself. Like he was just,
Oh, okay.
it was kind of similar to his address poisoning attack video that he posted a couple weeks back too. So, but the problem is now like people are getting so, entrenched in their ideological camps that it's now become this like purity test, right? Where if you even think about some alternative explanation for something, you're obviously a scammer, you're a spammer, you're an apologist, you're this, and it's just like, no, that's not, like once you start getting into just talking about, like even Crater was out there and like Lop posted something and he said, "Oh, Lop is a scammer," and it's like, but I keep posting this little meme, from Socrates. It said like, intelligent people talk about ideas, midwit people talk about events, and low wit people talk about people. But
Right.
all of the discussion now is orienting around people. So I'm like, this is all bottom feeder fucking nonsense now. And I'm
I
kind of,
do I do worry that, well, like Shinobi is one particular developer that it's just sort of like, you know, uh, creating vagary into, well, Bitcoin is, it's simply a protocol. It simply runs. It can be a database and it can be representative of money. And it's like, have you read the white paper? Read the white paper. What is the whole point of having created this thing? It is for the money that was made out of this. And it's like, yes, just because you can, Dasher made a good point on that panel about how, you have to um, work around the constraints to make this stuff work. So you're not using it as it was intended, as it was built in the spirit of it all.
right.
You're working around that. And yes, you can do it. But Shinobi's like, well, so be it. And that's what I get worried about, is that they don't understand the fundamentals of the initial white paper, like what is money. Um, it's
Well,
like meta level, like, well, anything could be money, right? So
yeah, and I think that also like deviates from the core premise of what's going on here, right? And I really, for as much as people don't like Eric Voskuil, I really wish more Bitcoiners would read Crypto Economics and really digest what he's talking about, because he talks about a lot of these fallacies that are being paraded around as if they're fact or logical or perfectly reasonable and all this kind of stuff. And a lot of them are just fallacious arguments, and they don't align with economic realities, they don't align with practical realities, and they don't necessarily align with the ethos of decentralization and stuff like that. But the problem is like, one of the big problems I see right now is like, even Adam Back came out and said, "Hey, well, there's some problems here with spam filtering, and you should be worried about this."
I
And
saw
the
that.
reaction wasn't like, "Oh, wow, well, Adam Back's got something to say about it." The reaction was, "Has Adam Back lost the plot? Is he corrupt too? Is he this?" And it's like, you guys are questioning now some very core people in the entire development of the Bitcoin ecosystem, or the Bitcoin chain, or the time chain, or the monetary system, or however you want to frame it, to start going, well, everybody that questions us is an enemy. I go, well, you guys, that's not healthy. That's not a healthy debate. That is quite literally like orienting yourself around an ideological stand, regardless of external input.
Yeah.
And I don't like that at all, because that's not conducive to anything beneficial. The bigger problem I see is that both camps are very grossly underestimating the enormity of the forces that are aligned against both of their ideologies. And they're sort of echoing like debates that happened in 2017 with the block size wars and all this kind of stuff, and the user activated soft fork and all these kind of ideas that like we can rise up and do this kind of thing. I go, this isn't 2017, man. This is 2025. And there's a very distinct reason why Fidelity and BlackRock and all these people have pushed hard for Bitcoin adoption. And it's not because they're concerned somehow that some user activated soft fork is going to screw up their bags. And these are not just, even the miners themselves are significantly more powerful than they were in 2017. And
Yeah.
these are now, if you start looking at the economic reality of what Bitcoin is confronted with, you've got 6 major mining pools, 4 of which are controlled by the United States and China, the sovereigns, not just ideologically or whatever. They are under sovereign capture and control. There are probably 10 to 15, maybe 20 economically important nodes, which are the exchanges. And a lot of them are not necessarily ideologically aligned. In fact, most of them are ideologically aligned against the pure monetary purpose of Bitcoin. And so, with those two forces working against you, if you have a bunch of infighting going on about shit that, like whether or not something is or is not spam and all this kind of stuff, you are inviting these massively powerful economic forces. You're giving them a wide open avenue to come in and just, wreck you from outside. So, what I think we need is more unity, more constructive conversation, and a little more appreciation for the actual external enemies that we are potentially facing in Bitcoin, which is not, developers with wizard hats versus, monetary purists. That is not the forces that we need to be fighting right now. We need to be unified in a common purpose, which is to protect this network from the encroachment of massively financially powerful, sovereign backed external forces. That's the people we need to be focusing our efforts and attention on. My
Yeah.
two
I'm glad the discussion is happening, and I'm glad. I think it's increasing awareness. At one level, awareness has grown, and a lot of people that were just kind of rolling with, you know, uh, their basic fundamentals are having to look into how does some of these things works. What is the mempool? What does it mean to do this or that? And like if relays are busy or um, blocks are full of garbage, and can your average small home node uh, handle a node? I think it's a good debate to have in the sense of it's clear to me that a majority of people in this space are caring and passionate about the fact that Bitcoin must be protected.
Right.
And even on the up return, like you're for opening up the limit, there's like Adam Beck's post in mentioned it, there are arguments about how, well, you want you don't want a whole bunch of um, indistinct, messy, having to get reconciled, different mempool things going on that relays are choked on trying to filter or sort out.
Right.
I get it. Um, Matthew Cratter had a video today, kind of to your point, where he was saying that um, um, you, you kind of like trying to take the middle path. Honestly, Matthew's been pretty strongly against op return and pro knots and anti. He seems very pro ossification, like, and I am as well. But he gets a little ad hominem with Lop and others.
Right.
But his video today was kind of middle path, where you can't sit on your laurels and say, "Oh, Bitcoin will be fine. Bitcoin will sort it out," between whatever reasons, free market or trust in the developers and the community and the size of it, that, oh, Bitcoin will be fine. At the other hand, you can't say, like, Bitcoin's future is in dire, you know, um, concern. Is what I got out of that. In the middle is like, we need to protect and work on Bitcoin, but we can't sit back and say, well, it's screwed, or also, no, it'll be fine.
Right.
It takes engagement. I really do like, yeah, like you said, Johnny Cratter has been all over this. I pretty much agree with Cratter. I just also, as soon as things get real, just like, oh, he's a shitcoiner. He's a shitcoiner.
Right.
They do have their reasonings. I just think we need to understand that and not get too divided over it all.
I agree with you 100%. Like that all that name calling and calling people corrupt and this and that and the other thing. I go, you guys are infighting. Like the enemy is at the gates. It's BlackRock and Fidelity. The enemy is at the gates. The United States government. The enemy is at the gates. The Chinese government. Those are your enemies. And right now, you guys are squabbling in the town square, going like, "Who's going to defend the gate and how are we doing it?" Well, you're done. You're not defending it right. No, the city's supposed to be this, and it's like you're about to have this swarm of forces aligned against you in ways that don't benefit your ideology. They don't benefit your mempool. They don't, and some of the things, the big problem I have with the prohibitionists is what I'm starting to refer to them, at least to myself, is they suffer from the same ideological and practical gaps that every prohibitionist ever in the history of prohibition schemes has faced. Whether you're talking about pornography or prostitution or drugs or gambling or any sort of vice or heresy, everybody that tries to stamp this stuff out, and they always come from a moral standpoint. We need to do this to protect blah, 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 whatever it is. They always underestimate adaptability and demand, like 100% of the time. And like I said, there are massive economic forces aligned against hodlers. And as Eric Voskuil pointed out in a post, that people immediately jump on and start calling Voskuil a scammer. I'm just like, what are you talking about, dude? This guy is probably one of the most, in terms of like integrity in development and things like that, I'd say he ranks up there in the top 10 easily. He just has a confrontational personality that people don't like. But what he's saying isn't, excuse me, what he's saying isn't wrong, you know. So, excuse me, I kind of got a little.
Yeah, no, I hear what you're saying. When I get, maybe during my weaker moments, or when I'm feeling particularly passionate, I do fall into habits of, um, just out of intellectual laziness. I'll be like, okay, what side am I on? And Shinobi, shitcoiner. Lop, shitcoiner. Um, the not Satoshi, what's his face? Shitcoiner.
Yeah.
Um, Peter Todd, shitcoiner. I uh, I fall into that, and then I have to back up and be like, okay, I'm not just. I am so full of hope and encouraged that, like, Bitcoin will be fine, and we can't just say, oh, it'll be fine. Part of me is like, yeah, no, we're fine. We're sorting stuff out. We're working at it. We're looking at it. Good, smart people are all over this. So let's not let this divide. what do they say? Throw out the perfect, or no, throw out the good for the perfect.
Right.
Um,
That's funny. Yeah, exactly right, Johnny. Let's not become a Monty Python skit. And that's exactly what we're doing right now is just allowing ourselves to be a Monty Python skit. It's just like you guys really need to just back off the rhetoric, and you guys all of collectively, everyone needs to back off the rhetoric and start looking at some fucking economic realities and financial pressures. Because like it just as an example, if you went, okay, every single pleb that runs a node, which is 0.02% of the people that hold Bitcoin run nodes, so that's a huge problem right there. You go, if every single one of them tomorrow said, you know what, all 17,000 reachable nodes right now, 90% of them switch to knots overnight. And then the miners, let's just say, I'm not saying this is going to happen, but let's just say they realize some protocol wizard comes along and figures out a way to make blocks worth X more than the block reward, right? And they are willing to stuff miners' pockets full of stuff. What is to stop a miner that's got billions of dollars in hardware, technical expertise from just going and saying, oh, okay, we'll just spin up 17,000 nodes of our own and we'll make them friendly to our policies? So what happened to your 90% knots deployment? Well, now it's 50%, right? Or 45%. And what's to stop these same miners from going, oh, well, we don't even want to have any hiccups. So how about all four of us pools get together and we'll just deploy 25,000 nodes each? We'll just node stuff the entire network, like because that's going to cost us $1 million a year to run, but we're going to make 50 or $100 million per whatever spam ding dong blockchain, JPEG wizard, whatever thing. Who knows, right? So you go, well, how much power do these nodes have? Not to mention, like the user activated soft fork only went through back in 2017 because the exchanges got on board, right? And that was sufficient to start pressuring the miners to go, okay, well, we'll come up with a compromise, or we'll do something, or we'll adopt SegWit and blah blah blah. But that's not necessarily a foregone conclusion that something like that would happen again. And there may very well be financial pressures right now, like people that have funds in an ETF, they're going to go, well, we don't necessarily want to like bankrupt all the miners by blocking all this spam, because that's going to screw up our ETF scheme. And we value stability over our ETFs far more than we value, Dash Junior's ideological standpoint. You go, well, what do you do then? But now you don't even have a voice at the table if they just stomp you right out of it. And, Crater had a thing about BlackRock in their prospectus say, hey, if there's a chain split, we pick what Bitcoin is. And Crater said, that's not how it works. And I go, well, yeah, except if you take into account that 0.02% of node runners are the Bitcoiners are node runners, you go, well, who's going to decide then? 0.2% of the Bitcoin holders, or the people that are just sitting on Bitcoin because number go up and they don't know anything about any of this shit. They just go, oh, I hold Bitcoin right next to my Doge or my Shiba Inu. They're not
mhm.
going to care. They're just going to be trading on whatever Kraken says Bitcoin is, and they're going to be trading whatever Coinbase says Bitcoin is, and the ETFs are going to be trading whatever Coinbase and Kraken say. And right now, Coinbase, which is one of the largest exchanges in the world, is custodying Bitcoin for these massive ETFs. So to think that Larry Fink won't come down and go, hey, you need to back off this user activated soft fork shit. You need to do this. You need to do that. And if you don't, we're going to shut down your goddamn exchange because I got a hotline to the SEC and to the DOJ and all kinds of stuff. So you want to stay in business, do it our way. And you go, well, what
Yeah,
happens there? And Kraken and Gemini and every USB based thing. And if they can convince their Chinese buddies that run their Chinese mines to do the same thing, then guess what happens, right? So we need to be very, very, very careful about where we're placing our focus right now. And to really decentralize what we're doing, you need to bring on about 300 exahash per second of decentralized mining and about another 500,000 to 750,000 nodes. And until you start crossing that threshold where people are truly embracing Bitcoin for its sovereign properties, you're at desperate risk for centralization forces and sovereign capture.
yeah. I think the big players can readily, if they were to want to, start to try to push and dictate if they were investing in controlling, mining and directional push on Bitcoin that it's like there's so many big players out there that are they've been polite about it lately, like like Mara mining and stuff. Yeah, they do their thing, but they're not. I mean, they're they're one, but I I feel like in the face of that, there's all these big players that are getting more and more in and all in on this. So then, what are the real options and solutions to maintain small decentralized environment? In my mind, it's what is it? Home mining, small miners, accessibility to that, which I've seen grow. I mean, I've seen it grow.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I
people
asked.
are
Oh, sorry. Go
people
ahead.
are shifting to knots, but I don't think that really matters so much, other than it's symbolic.
Yeah.
Um, I think it's maybe a check on, hey, core. If you ever thought you are the end all be all of how Bitcoin will be um, interacted with, just be have been checked. Check yourselves a little bit here. Just be aware that it's more than a ministry of your church. So whether it's symbolic or not, hopefully it's just kind of a check on that. But big picture, massive forces are at play here. All
Hmm.
I can hope is that the accessibility from small plebs and stuff is there, so that like, hey, if you're into Bitcoin, whatever, um, run little home miners and stuff like that. And then also maybe at some point it's cost effective to mine more, do a little more, even if you hit a block every few years, but that's worth it. Or you contribute to a pool that gives you 1,000 sats a month, but that's worth it.
Yeah.
Um,
Well, I asked Grok. I said, "Hey, how many Bitcoin holders would have to run home miners to effectively decentralize the network?" They said, "Well, if you assume 1 million Bitcoin holders, all fired up miners, they'd all have to run about 1,000 home miners each in order to meaningfully impact mining decentralization." You go, "Ooh, okay, that's not great." So I followed it up and I said, "Well, is that practical?" I go, "No, like zero chance that's going to happen, right?" And so it's one of the big reasons I'm hugely supportive of ocean mining, because they are probably the only entity out there that is actively addressing. And one of the reasons I'm such a huge fan of grass-fed Bitcoin is because when ocean mining approached him, he said, "This is neat because they're the first people I've seen that are trying to address the mining centralization problem." So it's very disappointing to see them getting tangled up in the spokes about spam prohibition and things like that, especially in the face of things like Adam Back saying, "Hey, man, just I get where you're coming from, and there's some stuff we got to think about here." And so just digging in your heels and going, "Well, prohibition works," but you can say whether or not I'm an expert on mining or programming or network systems or anything like that. What I can tell you for a fact is I'm an expert on the drug war, and I'm an expert on prohibition schemes throughout history. And what I can tell you is it's the exact same rhetoric that's being used. It's the exact same tactics, and they are faced with the exact same pressures that are always overlooked by prohibitionists. Because if you go back to the 1980s, people going, "We should have the death penalty for drug dealers, and we're going to ramp up enforcement. We're going to do this and we're going to do that," and da 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 da. So if you equate miners to drug cartels, and then you equate prohibition schemes like spam filters to drug interdiction, you go, "Well, how well did that work out, and what sort of unintended negative consequences came from efforts to combat the illicit drug trade?" You go, "Oh God, well, that brought you KYC AML rules. I mean, that just massively exploited that whole scheme. That gave you the prison industrial complex, that gave you the law enforcement industrial complex, that gave you like all sorts of encroachments on freedoms and rights and liberties, civil asset forfeiture. I mean, just unlimited chaos and destruction has flowed from that prohibition scheme." So I go, just you got to be careful when you start talking about this shit, especially if there's an economic incentive that is contrary to your desired outcome. So,
yeah,
you
and
know,
even in the midst of all this debate, the price grows and grows and grows. Clearly, not dictated by any FUD concerns over these technical details or the PR or the how it's promoted or argued over. Larger forces drive adoption and price here. And so, like in one sense, Bitcoin don't care. Bitcoin just TikTok next block. It's working. It's running. The big players know it. Money number is still growing. Inevitably, I mean, following the M2 money supply, perhaps, or the money printing. So it'd be like, yeah, you can pass all the drug laws you want, filter all you want. The CIA is still shipping out of Colombia through Panama into New York City. So go fuck yourself.
Right.
Uh,
Yeah. 100%. I mean, that's the problem is there's so much adaptability, especially the problem with prohibition schemes is it can inadvertently create even greater financial incentives for people to work around your prohibitions, right? Like booze before prohibition was worthless, nearly worthless. Booze after prohibition made the mob, it made gangsters and these criminal organizations that persist to this day. Cocaine and heroin and pot and all that kind of stuff was virtually worthless prior to prohibition. Once they introduced prohibition, all of a sudden they created this lucrative captured market, right? And we now have criminal enterprises that can rival state authorities. Like if you look at the cartels down in Mexico and stuff like that, the Mexican government can't stamp them out because they don't have enough military firepower to combat them. And you go, well, did you get what you wanted by doing your prohibition scheme, or did you foster and fuel some other thing that you didn't anticipate? And now you're so dug in and so entrenched that you can't back out of it. You go, ugh, that's gross. But if you look at the other side, that was permissive tolerance and people that try and go, well, let's just let it happen, and people are going to do it anyway, which is kind of what Core is doing now. You go, well, just go look at Seattle and Portland and go, tell me how well that worked out. So you can't just ignore it. You can't just sit on your hands and go, whatever, it's going to happen anyway. Not an effective solution. And you can't just go, well, we're just going to ban it, because you have other problems that emerge from that, and they're not necessarily problems that you can foresee. And a lot of the same people that are talking about spam filtering are the same people that supported SegWit and Taproot. And then they look back and go, oh, we didn't see all this shit coming down the pike. Gosh, we wish we would have thought about that a little bit more. But now they're certain that their spam filtering idea is going to be the thing that's going to fix everything. And I have a very high suspicion that they're going to look back in 5 or 10 years and go, oh, we didn't see all this shit coming. So I may be wrong, whatever. But what I can say is all I can base this on is the rhetoric I'm seeing and the positioning people are taking. And I go, man, that you guys don't realize what kind of fire you're playing with. Thank you, Johnny. Yeah.
yeah, it's interesting. Part of me feels like I kind of easily I can say I feel like Bitcoin's gonna be okay, but we need to stay vigilant, and the developers and the community about it need to help try to keep the focus there.
Yeah.
I worry that well, so I saw a post on X a week ago or so. It was kind of like, like when the ETFs first came out, and it was like, oh, great, Wall Street's getting in on this now. They're going to co-opt it. And like Johnny's point, saying, you don't want to see Bitcoin just become another like Wall Street entity, or just
Right.
another game that the TradFi
Right.
uh, mob plays and plays against, or it obfuscates, like, what is paper Bitcoin, what is real, do we know what's going on with this? There's news that, oh, some big entity bought so much huge amount of Bitcoin and the price drops, and people are like, what is going on here now? How does Bitcoin work? um, and at the same time, so this post said this was inevitable. If Bitcoin was going to succeed, and as it integrates into the traditional system, and it's part of what we would say, I think, is the great realignment. It's going to get integrated. It's going to look like it's getting like co-opted or controlled or whatever. And what it's doing, I feel like, is a Bitcoin will continue to run and do its thing. And the big players are going to play their games all around it and in it and with it as they're being realigned around it. And Bitcoin will continue to work, and things, it'll be like educating yourself on what that new system is. Say, what is it looking like? Bitcoin's still working, but how does our fiat brain and traditional view on financing start to integrate and change, and does it make any sense? I don't know. I'm still getting my mind around that, but I feel like, okay, this was inevitable that Wall Street gets in on it, big corporations start to get in on it, nation states start to get in on it. And then they all want to have their games and play and stuff. But if they're really going to own and hold Bitcoin, they are still beholden to those rules. Um,
Well, unless they start setting the rules. I mean, that, the one big caveat in my entire book is based on Jeff Booth's very salient point, provided the network stays decentralized and secure. And I even say in the book that's not a foregone conclusion, right? Like, I think Bitcoin holds enormous promise. I 100% believe that it has the power and ability to transform the entire global economy. And it also requires that Bitcoin retain some of its core characteristics, which are decentralization and security. And whether or not that means the blockchain is bloated full of JPEGs of ding dong pics or whatever, I don't know. But what I can say is the infighting from the Bitcoin side is counterproductive to remaining decentralized and secure. And I think people need to be very realistic about the economic incentives that are aligned against maintaining decentralization and security. And, one of the more acute fears that I have is mining centralization. Core monoculture is a huge, huge, huge problem, which is why I also support knots. I don't necessarily agree entirely with the spam filtering idea, and yet I support the optionality of having nodes running knots. What I would really, really like to see people pouring their efforts into is not necessarily about whether or not my node is going to pass spam and you can't put nonsense on my node and yada, yada, yada. Because if that spam gets passed, your node is going to store it, period. Like if it's in the blockchain and you're still part of that consensus network, that you're storing it, whether or not you filtered it to begin with or not, it's going to be there. So I 100% appreciate and support the ideological stand. Like, hey, we need to try and, as much as possible, keep this a monetary network. And we also have to collectively come together as a Bitcoin community and go, hey, if you really want to help, spin up a node, run a node, and interact with the blockchain through that node. Because if you're not doing that, you're not really participating in the network. What you're doing is you're using a third party to validate transactions for you, which you might as well use the bank. So running a node and interacting with the network that way is a way to exercise your sovereignty. But the idea that nodes get to dictate what happens, I think, is overstated grossly. And, if people are clinging to the idea that we're going to have some sort of new user activated soft fork, it's possible, very possible. And it's also possible that the economic forces aligned against that idea will just stomp it into, it'll be as relevant as Bitcoin Cash is.
yeah, I agree. Yeah,
So,
even a more correct, accurate based Bitcoin that forks off will fail at this point. It's what we have running now is too big to. I mean, we need to have the conversations. We need to keep it on track and steered. But if you're talking about a fork, I'm sorry, but you're gone right now. You'd be gone.
yeah. Yeah.
I had an interest. Go
Oh,
ahead.
sorry. I just wanted to comment on, because I agree with you, Johnny. I'm super, super glad for this conversation, just because it's hopefully going to draw focus and attention to it, which is why I'm so dramatically opposed to the type of rhetoric that's being deployed by both sides, and the ad hominem attacks, and you're a shitcoiner, or you're this, you're that, or, questioning Adam Back, or questioning anybody's motives and all this kind of stuff. I go, hey man, that's not, none of that stuff is helpful, because both quote unquote sides of this thing need to come together and figure out realistic fixes for our bigger problems, which are the enemies at the gates.
I,
Great.
this was a book that I stumbled across that 15 years ago. And anyway, that's what that Creature in Jekyll Island and then Confessions of an Economic Hitman. These kind of stoked my fires in terms of the big picture and what in the heck is going on here with money and what is money. And of course, things like the IMF and World Bank and CIA and all that hijinks. Um, along the lines of what you're talking about, so you think about the size of Bitcoin, and you've seen the little graphs and charts where, like, here's Bitcoin and here's all the assets of the world that are looking for a home or just are doing what they know to do now, and how like there's this potential huge wave of um, price action that could happen. Similarly, on a social level, I think about people who have been orange pilled and understand Bitcoin now. It's like this little seed of people. Like how many people really are talking about this, are trying to understand it, maybe get it, and are even having these conversations. The great giant pressure of Bitcoiners or potential Bitcoiners are coming from a space of pure delusion or brainwashing. And I had a conversation literally yesterday with a guy that I'd known for a while, but then he'd heard through like friend of a friend kind of thing. Hey, I heard you're into Bitcoin, and I'm like, oh yeah. He's like, oh, and he wanted to talk all about it. He's like, I'm into Bitcoin too. I'm just learning stuff, and I want to, I want to do more. Or where can I learn more? And I'm like, oh, great. So, you know, what do you do? Where are you coming from? And he's basically like, well, I put everything I like invest or save. I put all in crypto. Okay, okay, what does that mean? Well, so I use Coinbase and I have Bitcoin, but I do like kind of a bit of everything. So he's on there, and I mean, I don't know what information he's looking at, but he's going on to Coinbase. And of course, when you go to these sites, like kind of like PayPal, and you're looking for where's the functionality behind the advertising, and you're looking for Bitcoin, and there's all these other Bitcoins. But anyway, he's got stuff in all kinds of everything.
Coins.
And so my first step with him was, hey, I've been exactly there. I started where you are as well.
Yeah.
And as I learned and studied and a little bit of wreckage here and there, I have learned that Bitcoin is the only hard asset, real non rug pull speculative joke. And so I gave him some information about why Bitcoin only.
Yeah.
And he got that. He's like, okay, yeah, I get it. I got to learn more. And he wanted to learn more. Um, but then as I'm talking to him as well, I'm describing how, okay, so you've got everything on Coinbase. So just understand that you have, call it Bitcoin. You have Bitcoin.
You have an IOU.
Yeah. So I said, where is your Bitcoin? It's on an exchange, and it's not, I'm not even saying it's a good one. It's a Coinbase, which is, I would say I don't trust it. You don't want to trust, you've got counterparty risk there. And not only is it just, okay, it's on an exchange, but it's Coinbase,
Right.
whose motivations are all over the place, not even good for Bitcoin. So I said, I recommend as you go down this direction, you want to know where is your Bitcoin, and do you want to take responsibility of it? And if you do, how do you do that? And it's a rabbit trail, but there's a lot that you could go down the road on here about. And so I'll just let you know where I went with all that and what I try to do. Um, and you're on the right path. And so I'm being encouraging, but I'm realizing that here's a very rare person I found who's like into Bitcoin.
Right.
And he is so completely possibly able to be just distracted, co-opted, brainwashed, lost, stuck in just like, well, someone tell me what to do. I have Bitcoin. I'm into Bitcoin. And it's like, it, I could say like, no, you don't. And no, you aren't.
Right.
He wants to be, but a huge number of people are going to be beholden to one, their willingness to invest time and energy and interest in it and dig in, which I think I would just say most people don't, and that he gets that from the right sources. So here's one person I can kind of start to hit, plant a seed here, encourage him there, give a little more there, and I'm like, great, this is great. And at the same time, how many of those people are out there who are like, hey, financial advisor or broker or friend, what do you think of stuff? And it's like, yeah, just put more into Coinbase.
Right.
Um, I don't know.
Or
I
Robin.
get kind of cynical about it,
Yeah.
but
Well,
there's a
I
long
mean,
road.
Yeah, most people. I mean, Johnny, you're right. Like, you're absolutely right. I'm grateful that the guy's even thinking about it. So that's the first step. Everybody has to take their first step, right? And some people it's going to take a long time. Like Michael Saylor just said the other day, it took him 8 years to realize he was wrong.
Yeah.
So you got the Rat Poison Squared crew and just all the FUD and all the stuff out there. Like it's just a hard journey for anybody. And if you start talking about like state authority, sovereign power, what you're actually subjected to and the reality of your existence, people just get uncomfortable because they're very comfortable in their illusions and going like, oh well, I'm free in America, and it's like, well, are you really? Like, but like there's a sort of peace, I think, in just being in the Matrix, right? Like the guy that just wanted steak. He goes, I just want to taste a steak again. I don't give a shit. And I
I've
think
had
that's
that
most people
vision.
in the
Uh,
Matrix right now. There are people that are just sitting there like, I just want my steak. I just want my barbecue this weekend. I just want to watch the football game. I don't want to think about any of these things that are going on in the world because it doesn't matter to me. Like, I just want to live and die and, make babies and drive a truck. So whether or not those people ever wake up, I mean, there's always, but that was probably true in 1776 too. There's a bunch of people just going, I just want to raise my pigs. I don't care about Britain or taxes, or that's a rich person problem. Like, what do I care about your tax on tea? I just grow, whatever in my yard. So go
yeah.
buy, right? But still, there were that select core group of people that kind of rallied people to the cause and said, "Hey, there's bigger things at foot here, and you might consider, walking halfway across the country with a rifle strapped to your back and go fight with us." So,
Yeah.
but nowadays, there's so much apathy and complacency, and just throughout the Western economies, like it's to get
Yeah.
people on board, I think is a tough journey.
Yeah, so encouragingly, like Johnny mentions, it is one more person that kind of popped up from random that, hey, I heard from a guy who knows, well, yeah, Fritz is into Bitcoin. And so then if it's one more person that over time I just kind of keep away from the fire and and keep from drowning. It's one more person. And then last night thinking about it, I had this kind of vision of the idea that Morpheus goes to Neo and is like, "Do you want to learn?" And Neo's like, "Yeah." So you take the red pill, and then so you start to wake them up. You take the crank out of their head, and they pull out of the bubble, and they're gasping for air, and they look around, and they go, "On second thought,
Put me back.
actually, I want to know, but I also I don't have the time. I'm busy. There have been guys that like when we had the meetups, and I'd invite them time after time. I'm like, hey, we got a meetup coming. Can you make it? Oh yeah, no, that'd be cool. Yeah, yeah, sure. Yeah, I want to go. They don't show up, and
Yeah.
it's kind of like intellectually you want to know and you're into it, but there's a game on, and or I'm busy, or it takes a special kind of psychopath like us, I think, to be like, this is important, and I've been into this for years.
Yeah.
And then so a lot of people are like, oh no, yeah, no, that's cool. I want to learn more. No, I get it. And then like a year later, they're like, oh yeah, no, I haven't done anything about it. No,
Right.
I'm still interested though. And it's
Right.
like, okay,
Yeah.
well, keep chewing on the blue pills. It's it
Yeah.
is.
I think people are going to keep munching on blue pills until Bitcoin's worth $1 million, and then they'll go, oh. But like I said in the book, I think, yeah, waking up is absolutely startling. Yeah, put the
Well, I
plug.
got into it when I really started taking the red pills. Well, like reading this book and then others, I got into a dark place for a while because I think waking up to that and then you're just like, it is so corruptibly, criminally, sickeningly evil.
Right.
And then you kind of have to like process it all and then back up and be like, well, okay, what can we really do? And I can take care of my family. You can take care of your homestead and your mental health and your physical health. And then Bitcoin suddenly became another one thing you can be doing. anyway, but Bitcoin for me, like you've said before, Bitcoin alleviated a lot of that angst about this big broken, matrix.
Right.
And it's like, okay, it's not on me. I'm not gonna like fix the matrix. I'm not Neo, but I can stay humble and stack sats, and then tend to the farm. And so that's what I can do.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I mean, like, the thing is with the number of where the hell is my tab here? I was looking at another tab. Um, just to get like my thesis in my book basically says I don't think most people are ever going to get Bitcoin, just like they don't get money right now. Like I think it's just going to gradually morph into a thing that they just use and don't even realize it, right? And I think that's probably the healthiest, most positive outcome that we can shoot for, is just most people are kind of like blissfully unaware that there is this thing that kind of made their lives a little bit better. Like if we can get to that point, I think Bitcoin will have achieved an enormous win for humanity. So I think there's something very valuable to fight for and fight with and fight towards, that doesn't necessarily mean orange pilling the world. But the economically important people, I think, need to get on board. And, you know, it's sort of a weird hierarchical kind of system that we're all in, right? But even Bitcoin has that right now. Like, if you really start breaking it out, there are probably 5 to 7,000 entities that control 75% of the float of Bitcoin right now. And so you
Yeah,
go, well, how does that work if all the plebs are hopping in this and that, but 80% is controlled by less than 10,000 people? You go, well, how's that any different than what we have right now? And it doesn't seem on its face to be that much different, right? Like it's always the same people that always end up wielding the same levers of control and power, whether they were early stackers and whales or whatnot, or if they're MicroStrategy that now controls 2.8% or whatever it is, or if you're the exchanges that control 14 or 15% of the available float, the accessible float, or if you're the new ETFs that now control 5% of the accessible float. And you start looking at it and you go, yeah, yeah, we need to start working on this.
so what do you think about Lawrence Lepard and his money, or his book, The Big Print? And I think I reposted, he was on an interview, and I mean, he is so super bullish, I suppose, but in a sense, the Bitcoin standard being inevitable. Maybe I can share this. Did you see this? Let me see. He was on an interview where he basically said that Bitcoin is going to break these motherfuckers. And
Yeah, maybe.
um,
If it remains decentralized and secure, 100%. Undoubtedly, he's absolutely correct. If it somehow gets co opted, centralized, diminished, state sovereign controlled, censorship prone, then a lot of those theses fall apart pretty quickly, unfortunately.
let's see. Can you see this?
That's exactly right, Johnny. First you're pissed, then you channel. Yeah, 100%. That's what we're trying to do here. We're trying to channel the Bitcoin love, get people involved. So, as I say always, fire up a node. If you're not running a node, you're not helping. Apathetic hodling is not helpful to the network. Run a node,
And
spin
when
up.
gold's at $10,000 an ounce,
Okay.
honest
Did you
people
see this?
who have held these things are going to be the richest people in this country. And other people are going to be hurting. These honest people are going to be standing up and saying, look, here's how they did you wrong. Ben Bernanke is John Law. He should go into the history books as a complete fraud. All these things are going to be exposed. I mean, the fact that the CIA killed Kennedy, all this shit, it's all going to come out as part of this fourth turning. And there's going to be a massive reset. And honest Bitcoiners are going to end up creating America 2.0, just a complete reform of all the fucking shit that's broken. And that'll happen because anybody that has a coin will be rich. And anybody that has 10 coins will be really rich. And they'll be the people who are in a position to lead and make a better system. That's my dream. And I don't think it's a dream. I mean, I think it actually could be a reality. I think there's some issue about how long it'll take. I mean, I'm 65. I think it happens in my lifetime, but probably at the tail end of it. I think it's a 10, 15, 20-year project here until we get complete fiat failure and complete government reform. I mean, fourth turnings historically have lasted 20 or 30 years. And I think the kickoff to this fourth turning was the GFC. The earliest this thing could wrap up is 2028, and the latest it could wrap up would be 2038, maybe. But it's going to wrap up because the math is just, it's relentless.
Yeah,
It's
the math just
absolutely
isn't math.
relentless.
Yeah,
And more people are figuring it out. I mean, people say, how can we make this go faster? How can we get to the other side quicker? We got to orange pill everybody. The thing, I'll tell you something I think is really important. To me, is a huge thing. I was fighting this battle before Bitcoin was invented. Okay, I've been fighting this battle for 20, 30 years. I've been a sound money guy. I've been a hard money advocate. You know how cool it was to see Bitcoin come along and to see Safe's book come along and start going to conferences and to have 20 and 30-year-olds, quoting von Mises to me. I mean, shit, I read von Mises right after college. And I used to talk about Austrian economics in the 80s and 90s, and people thought I was from Mars. I mean, nobody had a clue about this shit, right? And we're still in early days. I mean, the people who get this whole sound money issue, it's definitely less than 10% of the population. It could be as low as 1%. I don't think it's quite that low. It's somewhere between those two numbers. Well, the whole world's going to understand this shit in 30 years. I mean, our kids, our grandkids are going to say,
we got it. I think we got it, Fritz. Come on.
Yeah. So anyway, I saw that, and then I'm like, yeah, you know what? Bitcoin is just going to continue to work, and it's going to realign the system. It may bust things wide open and destroy things, but anyway.
Yeah. Hey, will you share that link for me, please?
Oh yeah.
I can only send it to Rumble for some reason.
Let me put it out there.
Thank you. But for those who are curious, I agree with Larry the Pard. Like, I actually, one of the first times I heard him talk, I was like, oh my God, I'm that guy too, right? Because like I was the guy back in the 90s was like, we need a gold standard. We need this. And people are just like, what kind of lunatic are you, dude? I'm like, I'm a libertarian, and just universally mocked and ignored. So similar to Larry, once I kind of grasped that Bitcoin isn't just another shitcoin, it was sort of transformative for me as well. It was kind of like, oh, this is neat. But to his point, it's like neat now because I can hop on Twitter on any given day and people are talking about sound money. I'm just like, this is unique. This is fun. I can enjoy this. But I wanted to post that link on there because that's crypto economics. If you're a Bitcoiner, regardless if you like Eric Voskuil or not, I think everybody should read this book and try and understand as best they can the principles that are embodied in it. It's a bit dense. It's a bit hard to read, I think. And I'm a smarty pants guy, so it may not be for everybody, but it blows open a lot of the fallacies and fallacious arguments that you'll see, especially right now being bandied about in the opportune debate on both sides. It blows open a lot of the fallacies about what Bitcoin is or isn't and what it can and can't do. And my one sort of, and I agree with nearly everything that he says, save for my one little caveat, which he said, I can't see any use as Bitcoin as a reserve asset. And I go, I differ slightly there, and that was the primary principle of my entire book is like, I think it does have a valuable role as a reserve asset and it can help do things. But to his point, all of those qualities flow from things like decentralized mining, decentralized merchants, what he calls merchants, which are Bitcoiners, right? Bitcoiners that interact with the network through their node and use Bitcoin in transactions. And that is sort of like he touches on with the balance of power fallacy and a lot of fallacies he kind of blows open. But definitely worth checking out, definitely worth reading. And if you're still into Bitcoin after that, then I go, yeah, you're probably a maxi, But prior to, if you're just stuck on number go up narratives and, the Bitcoin standard and all this kind of stuff, I go, well, there's some things you should consider before you really put your eggs in that basket. And I read the book and I've still put all my eggs in the basket. So I consider myself very much a Bitcoin monetary maxi. And I recognize, there's a lot of economic issues that need to be addressed, and they need to be addressed collectively and cooperatively and thoughtfully, not just, it's not time to start planting flags and, getting on ideological high horses. And it's time for the Bitcoin people, especially people that are intimately involved with the development and propagation of Bitcoin as a network, need to work together in a much more collaborative fashion, because the people that are aligned against the Bitcoin ethos are very much on the same page, and they do not care about ideology, practicalities, nodes. They don't care about how many nodes you're running. They don't care what software version you're running. They don't care.
Yeah.
you need to
As
get.
evident in recent price. Yeah, I'll have to check this out. It's got the hoarding fallacy, prisoner's dilemma fallacy, private key fallacy, proof of work fallacy. Um,
Well, here's a
yeah,
quote. I'll share a quote because he's also got this on GitHub. One of the nice things, I was actually kind of inspired by him to release my book for free as well, because he put his entire book out, on both GitHub and as a PDF. He said you can just go read it. Like you can buy it on Amazon if you want. But right here, he said the idea that miners and merchants, Bitcoin holders that run nodes, are in an adversarial position is a failure to understand the Bitcoin security model. Merchants, Bitcoiners, purchase a service from miners, and as such, the two are engaged in trade. Merchants, Bitcoiners, purchase mining services that conform to their rules for a satisfactory fee. They are free to split, and miners are free to not mine at all or to not select particular transactions for whatever reason suits them. Trade is neither adversarial nor asymmetrical. It is voluntary and mutually beneficial, with all tensions resolved in price. I think that's a key thing that people need to embrace, understand, and focus on, because, and that's just one of many fallacies that get sort of bandied about. Oh, that coffee looks good, man.
I need another dose. I agree. I'm going to read that book, and I know I'll still be a Bitcoin maxi afterwards, but I'll be even more ossified in my brain as to why.
Well, I hope so.
And
That's the ideal outcome. But I mean, like that's the thing is you have to be able to steel man your arguments, and this guy will 100% steel man your stuff. And if you can survive the challenges that he poses to your ideology and to your ethos, then you go, okay, well, you're onto something, right? But if you look at that stuff and it just makes you mad, or you start getting scared or whatever, you go, well, then you probably haven't thought this through well enough, to be staking your economic future on it. And that's one of the reasons why I'm a big fan of the guy. I think he's a great developer. He was on some podcast, and he was kind of crapping all over Safadine and all kinds of stuff. So he's definitely inflammatory. I don't, I mean, I guess Safadine sent him his book, and he wrote back and said, this is all dumb, and this is dumb, and this is dumb. And then Safadine got pissed and put the book out anyway, and, whatever. But the guy whose podcast he was on, I can't remember his name right now, but he's sort of a pariah as well. Like I still follow him. Like I follow most people, like if they're into Bitcoin, regardless of their opinion, if they're spammers, if they're wizard hat guys, whatever, I follow them all because they all have something that's going to help round out my information, and if I can't withstand their scrutiny or their ideas, then I go, well, I'm an ideologue and I'm a zealot. And that to me is not a sane place to base your foundation in a movement, right? You go, if you're just a zealot and an ideologue, you go, well, you're going to run into problems with that. So for me personally, I just want to be a person that's well informed on as many angles as I can possibly get, because I think that's where I can make my own best rational decisions. And despite all of everything that's going on in the world, I'm still 100% a Bitcoiner. So if that's any benefit to anybody, I'm perhaps a lunatic, but I'm 100% on board. So
yeah, follows are not endorsements. And I mean, like I still follow Lop because he has some interesting things to say, and there's things that I can just judge and say I disagree. Others, I'm like, oh, okay, I learned something here, but let me process the argument. And
right.
I think I unfollowed Shinobi because he was saying some shit about things. I was just like, I just don't need more of that. I was just tired of Shinobi,
Yeah.
but I get it from other places. But yeah, I hear what you're saying. It's like with orange pilling, I think there's an ossification to orange pilling, and it's a long journey. And the fact that there's all this disagreement and fighting going on over the upper and other things about it, Bitcoin nuts, Bitcoin core, and all that, and yet the price goes up. I'm thinking, you know what? Bitcoin continues to run, and it's a good experience for guys like me. Say, I'm well orange pilled, self proclaimed maxi, and I have to ossify my orange pill. So,
Well, I would recommend against ossifying your orange pill. I would say always check your assumptions, eternally, because there may be a time when you look at Bitcoin and go, oh, this isn't anything like what I thought it was. I really shouldn't be doing this. Oh, this actually turned out to be something that's negative, right? I mean, it's the ability to shift direction is, I think, important to humanity in general.
If it got that far for me, and I cannot envision that world. I think if Bitcoin is performing some semblance of some kind of basic function for some who can use it in that way, it may be still the best we got. And so if in my mind, if I were to give up on Bitcoin and say, nope, time to move on, that's where I'm literally off the grid farming and reloading my ammunition.
Well,
I
I
don't
might
know.
be doing that anyway on a Bitcoin standard. So
That's true.
it's like,
That's
I
true.
don't know. I don't necessarily think that's a bad idea. I think what is likely to fall out from whether it's the end of the fourth turning or whether it's the Bitcoin standard or whether it's the, complete surveillance state takes over everything and we're all ruled by robots. I think at the end of the day, we're all probably going to find out the Amish had it right all along. So we'll see, though.
Just marrying outside the family,
Yeah,
don't
if they
get
could just get the marrying outside the family, they'd be doing a lot better. But
not,
I just,
yeah,
the ability to, like, one of the things I'm very fond of saying is the earth provides everything that we need. And it wasn't until people just decided to tell you that they owned the things you need is when everything broke down. And that's with agriculture. And that's where my book sort of starts its whole journey.
hmm
Once people start telling you that that earth that is everybody's is not yours to utilize, to survive on, you've stripped humanity of its core essential right. So these ideas about property and property rights and this and that and the other thing, those are all sovereign ideas. Those are all fiat ideas. Those are all, we tell you what you get to have ideas. And they're not necessarily aligned with humanity. So if Bitcoin can help reorient that so people have some sovereignty back and they have some access to the resources that Mother Earth gives all of us freely and gives us our creativity to exploit freely, if we can get closer to that world, I think Bitcoin's going to be an enormous success. So,
hmm and I think that gets into just the innate capability of human nature that at heart we want and desire, and it's kind of almost baked in to push and be curious and to thrive and to do something and to learn and to explore and just be like pushing. And Bitcoin can be that medium of facilitating all of that. But down in there, part of my hope for humanity is that down in there in all of us is that innate desire to be productive and learn and do and grow. And um, yeah, and
yeah,
Bitcoin will simply be a platform from which to launch any of that.
I
But
think
yeah,
it's the
no,
first best only opportunity we're going to have as humanity, probably for another 100 years.
yeah.
Unless, of course, AI turns out to be a benevolent, amazing ruler. I mean, maybe that'll. I don't see it coming, but I don't know. Um, but yeah, I think Bitcoin's worth fighting for. Bitcoin's worth saving, and
Yep.
the forces that are aligned against it right now, which are legacy fiat financial systems, should be resisted in thoughtful, constructive ways. Not shooting yourself in the foot to uphold some sort of vague ideological value, but to something where you can go, we need to preserve the critical components of this network, that it's sovereign property that no one can control. And however that ends up looking, I think it should be fought for, like, 100%. But I think it needs to be fought for collectively, constructively, by people that understand what Bitcoin really means. And one of the most interesting things from that Bitcoin plus plus little talk, Lop actually asked, how many people here support JPEGs on the chain? Only one hand went up, and I think he was, I can't tell if he was
Peter
joking.
Todd.
Yeah, Todd's hand went up. Nobody else supported it, including Lop, the person who asked the question. So people, I go, look, I don't think there's any mistaking about who is on what side of what. I think it's a practical argument that is getting lost in ego and ideology. But there are practical elements to this thing that have to be addressed, and they have to be addressed conscientiously and constructively, not by planting flags. So
Yeah.
for what worth my voice has, that's the one I'm going to put out there. And I'm in a position where I don't want to be pissing off anybody, and I certainly don't want to get labeled as one thing or the other. And I
Yeah.
but maintaining neutrality and objectivity is tough in a highly polarized, contentious environment where people are name calling as a default strategy. So it's tough, and especially when I see people I deeply admire engaging in that kind of behavior, I just go, well, you guys you're not doing yourself any favors. It might feel good in the short term, but that's a high time preference activity that all of these guys are engaging in right now. Very, very, very high time preference.
Yep.
Set of
Well,
tactics and ideas.
Well, it's kind of the idea. It's like if we want Bitcoin to survive, then we need to keep the miners functional as a business or placated and happy and making money. The miners want to make money. The miners are going to do what the miners going to do. So yeah, that's shitcoin. And so then
Maybe. I mean, that's the thing is I don't think we need to keep the miners happy. I think what we need to do is have decentralization and economic balance, right?
yeah, sure.
Decentralization is the thing that keeps us all. And there's at the risk of just parroting Voskul over and over and over again, but he's got there's the cockroach fallacy. But this right here, the qualitative security model, like if you read nothing else from Voskul, you should read this right here. This is the qualitative security model, and this will break down where security comes from in the Bitcoin network and what keeps this thing survivable. This is a model that's based on graph theory. It's a defensible model. It's got a couple little holes in it, but I don't think they're critical. The thing is, it's a way to look at the network topology. It's a way to look at the way this network is set up. I'm going to post a link here, and I'll stop sharing. And like I said, if you read nothing else of the book, you should read this and try and wrap your head around it. Copy it over to Grok and have Grok break it down for you. It will help people understand what is really at stake and where the pain and pressure points are, right? It's not necessarily about whether or not we're running spam filters. It is more about how do we distribute mining and sovereign node operators, meaning people that run nodes and then interface with the network and exchange via the network on their own node, not just relying on third parties to do their transactions for them and validate their transactions. So, but that would be, if I was going to plant a flag, that's the hill I'm going to die on, is we need to figure out how to incorporate that model more effectively, not argue amongst ourselves about what is or is not spam.
Yeah. And I do find it cringe to hear core developers say things. It sounds to me like, well, miners got a business to run, and what is money? Abstractions of money on Bitcoin, as if we don't know what that is. What is spam? As if we don't know what that is.
Well, but that's a problem. That's a problematic line of thinking, because like Justin Beckler said something like that. And I said, well, they had the same problem with porn. You go, everybody knows what porn is. Okay, what about this? Well, okay, that's not quite porn. Well, what about this? Well, that's obviously not porn. Okay, well, what about this? Well, that kind of is porn. Someone else goes, that's not porn. And you go, what are drugs? You're like, define a drug. What about alcohol? That's not a drug. It's like, what are you talking about?
Well, with Bitcoin, it's like, are you transacting Sats and UTXOs, or are you embedding something else?
Well, what about Lightning Network? Then you go, well, what are they doing?
It's a second layer. So the second layers do whatever you want.
Yeah, but second layers are using the data on the blockchain. So you go,
yeah, you're locking up Bitcoin. But
well, is that valid? Is that a valid economic transaction? Well, see, but that's your definition, right? So someone else is going to come along. That's the problem is there's you can't, and I'm not excusing it. Everybody knows that if you put a dick butt picture on the blockchain, everyone goes, that's not what it's there for. But it's the mushy middle that it becomes problematic, right? So when someone says everybody knows what spam is, not quite correct. Everybody knows what a monetary transaction is, not necessarily correct, and not necessarily in line with the original vision, because an escrow contract, which Satoshi talked about, is not specifically a monetary transaction. It's a third-party contract. It's two parties entering into a contract on an immutable blockchain. So escrow by itself is not a strictly monetary transaction, but Satoshi envisioned it being part of the blockchain. So you go, well, where are we going to draw the line? And if you start doing like what the Supreme Court did, trying to define porn, it just becomes this like mushy sort of subjective kind of thing. And like there's extremes, right? Everyone can agree on the extremes is what they say when they say we know what spam is. no one can agree on the middle ground necessarily, and conscientious people can differ on what that looks like and what it means. So
Yeah.
I
I
don't
don't
know.
see a lot of mushy middle ground. It's like it's either it's either sats on the network for an address locked up or multi-sig or otherwise, or it's not sats and it's some encrypted JPEG bullshit. Like if it's related to holding and moving peer-to-peer electronic cash, great. If it's outside of the white paper in that regard, it's quickly no middle. It's like you're either doing electronic peer-to-peer cash and store value, or you're inscribing stuff to get around all the rules just to put on non-satoshis. But
Well, I mean that's that assumes then you go, okay, well now Fritz is the person who determines what goes on the blockchain, right? And and that may exclude uses that you're not familiar with or thoughtful of, or it may there are a lot of unintended consequences that can flow from that ideology, just like there are unintended consequences that can flow from just lifting op return willy-nilly. Like there are every decision in an economic sphere that nobody controls is going to have downstream consequences, 100%. And for someone to say I can predict what these downstream consequences are going to be, I think is a monumental error in thinking, because like I said, a lot of these same folks supported SegWit and Taproot. They go, this is great. This is what we're going to do. We
yeah,
all support this. And what were the downstream consequences? Now we have trash bag ideas getting stuffed into data blocks. And
yeah,
so you go, well, you guys thought you knew what we were talking about then, and that blew up in your face. And now you think you know what you're talking about now. And you can't guarantee that that's not going to blow up in your face either. And you can say, well, it's just resistance, and we should resist, and we should, and we should. I go, well, shoulds are followed up with a lot of assumptions, and when you start making assumptions, you know what that means. It makes an ass out of you and some guy named Umption. So I don't know. I'm very, very cautious about all this stuff. And you can say I'm a fence sitter. You can disparage me all you want. I go, well, so be it. Like, people want to call me names or whatever, it's fine. But I go, if you underestimate these forces, you do so at your own risk on both sides, 100%.
yeah. My litmus test might be just what's the time preference on uh, incentives on Bitcoin, and what I'm seeing in some of these incentives are uh, high time preference, minor business model type inscription ordinal bullshit, and um, whereas the low time preference is protect Bitcoin at all costs,
Right.
functionally keep it functional.
Well, in order to keep it functional, you have to have a say in what's going on with Bitcoin. And if you get economically excluded from the conversation, then it won't matter, right?
Yeah,
So right now, like, you could argue that Core is trying to remain relevant to the conversation. At least they have something to say there. But right now, if these miners and the big exchanges all just go, you know what, we're just going to make Bitcoin our thing, and whatever we trade is Bitcoin is going to be Bitcoin now. And then Core is excluded. It just nobody runs Core. I mean, you could have this whole network of Core nodes, and then 200,000 exchange nodes and miner nodes, and that's the new Bitcoin network. And you go, well, our nodes won't process that stuff. Well, your nodes don't matter. So now what? You know, so it's I can't predict the future. Like I said, I don't agree with spamming the network. I don't agree with data stuffing. I don't agree with taproot workarounds. I don't agree with lifting op return limits. I don't agree with any of this stuff. I just don't necessarily think that the best way possible to do it is to get everybody riled up and pissed off and pining for a thing that may or may not even have ever existed in the history of the network, which is this strict monetary usage protocol. Because like I said, it invokes in me a lot of the same resistance to the narratives that I hear, because it reminds me very, very, very acutely of the drug war and laws against prostitution, laws against gambling, laws against all kinds of stuff. I go, man, you guys, do you see what comes from that kind of ideology and from taking a moral high ground? Because those drug warriors to this day will still defend their morality, and they'll still defend their decisions as being morally correct, despite the overwhelming evidence of massive amounts of global harm that came from those ideologies and those moral standpoints. So I hate to see people get entrenched in an ideology without any sort of reflection about greater costs, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, I don't disagree, and um, I just do my best to stay educated and keep up with it, and uh, hope that Bitcoin remains the fix to all end all be all of humanity. And I
That-
do honestly still believe it is.
I
I
do too. I do too. 100%.
It is.
I think we will get through this. I hope that people will stop being factionized and get together and start working on solutions. And I hope that they will all collectively realize that the real enemy is already at the gates, and it's not Lop in his wizard hat. It's Larry Fink and his fucking army of quants and regulators in his pocket and all. I mean, that's the real threat to everybody, right?
Yeah, that's
We need
true.
to figure out a way to work together to make sure that we can preserve Bitcoin as close as we possibly can to the thing that is aligns with our vision: a decentralized, permissionless, secure network for
Yeah.
monetary transactions, right?
So
So,
imagine
yeah,
all this concern over anything that's not Satoshis and UTXOs for exchange on Bitcoin. As you get corporate and nation state adoption on Bitcoin, and it grows tremendously. The price grows tremendously. There's huge, massive global adoption. Are these large, big entity players going to be dabbling in Taproot Wizard bullshit? I don't think so. I
I
think
don't
they're looking at it
either.
as money.
I think they do too, and I think they will default to the most conservative approach, no matter
Yes.
what. And
Yes.
if because people could argue like Core is a very conservative organization, and they have conservatively decided that lifting op return is probably a safer bet than not doing it. And so it's easy to go, yeah, you guys are corrupt, you guys are doing this just so you can do taproot wizards and blah blah blah, blah whatever. And you can also go, well, or they are conscientiously looking at something and go, I think this is probably better in the long term. And if you take that as a core assumption, rather than assuming ill intentions, but kind of assuming good intentions, and you go, well, where do you think BlackRock and Fidelity and all those people are going to line up? Do you think they're going to line up with a conservative approach, or do you think they're going to line up with a, clamp down, maybe fracture the network approach? They're 100% going to side on the conservative side. And if the conservative side doesn't align with ideology, that's where they're going. They don't care about your ideology.
Yeah.
BlackRock has however many trillions of dollars of assets under management. Their little, 1% holding of Bitcoin doesn't mean it's a fart in the wind for them, but they see something there worth investing in. But they're always going to side with the conservative approach because that's what those people do, regardless of evil intentions put behind them. Their goal is to grow their wealth 100%, right?
Yeah. BlackRock announces that, JPEG database storage on Bitcoin could be really lucrative. I don't think so.
Well, what I would love to see is the BlackRock and Fidelity and go, hey, well, you know what? We actually support not having this shit clogging up our network. I
Yeah.
don't think that's the likely outcome, but it's possible. It's 100% possible.
Yeah. They want it to run.
They want it, but they want it to run reliably and be mostly like what they picture Bitcoin to be. But the idea that they haven't researched all of this stuff, they haven't researched both sides of this issue. Whatever side they're going to come down on is going to be from a depth of research that most, I would argue, all Bitcoiners are not capable of doing. Like, or right down to the core devs and the people running Knots and Ocean. They have an army of people with PhDs that are investigating every possible angle you can imagine, and probably a lot that most Bitcoiners haven't even thought of yet, because that's the nature of their business. They need to hedge risk, and they need to look at every possible risk. And the idea that they haven't considered all of these outcomes, I think, is naive,
Mm-hmm.
if I could say so.
Yeah. They've definitely thought about it in depth.
Yeah.
And they're still all in. So, well, cool. We've
All
had a
right.
long one today.
Yeah, I'm just over here raging and tickling Eric Voskuil's balls about how great I think his book is. But for anybody still watching, I still think Bitcoin is the best, greatest hope we have for fixing a lot of the ills of the fiat system. I just hope people will back off their rhetoric a little bit and come together to help us make sure that that stays true.
Yeah. Bitcoin is our last and only hope. But
Yeah, maybe. Who knows? Maybe Trump will fix everything, right? The orange one will
yeah,
come and fix the Federal Reserve.
huh?
Anyway,
Yeah, he's
all right,
orange.
man. Well, it was a
Okay.
good chat.
All right. Until next time, we'll see you.
Thank you, Johnny. It's always good to see you, sir. And thanks everybody who joined us today. Double
Bye
see.
bye.